the whole meeting to order, April 27th. Welcome Mayor Ireland, Council, Mr. Given, Administration, members of the public. I'm going to ask for additions to the agenda. Is there any additions? Councillor Demota. I cannot hear you.
Oh, I said I was never going to do that, and I did it. I just have to do it in multiple screens here. I have 2 additions to add for the in-camera discussion for later on today. They're HR personnel matters. 14.3, that would be council remuneration for 2021 forward, and 14.3 being HR recommendation, or it's a personnel matter, HR recommendation for Culture and Rec Committee.
That would be 14.4. Okay.
14.4. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other additions? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher MP. If I might, I would like to add another presentation. I have received, and I expect other councillors have similarly received, inquiries about the COVID situation in Jasper recently, both from people external to the community and from local residents. And if I can, I would like to prevail upon Mr. Given for perhaps a brief update, even though we no longer have the ECC activated. I am aware that our staff is certainly staying on top of information, and it's an opportunity to get some of that information out to our public, those who are watching now and those who will watch the broadcast later. So with, of course, Mr. Given's consent, because I'm going to ask him to do it, I would like to add a brief presentation on COVID-19.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, for that. We will welcome that. We'll make it 5.2. Is that okay with you, Mr. Given? Perfect. Excellent. Anything else to add? If not, then can I have somebody to approve the agenda with 5.2 and under in camera 14.3 and 14.4? Councillor Demota, all in favor? That is carried. Councillor Butler, are you opposed to the agenda?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, 1 opposed. April 27 minutes of Committee of the Whole were circulated. Is there any errors, omissions, deletions?
Deputy Mayor Keller MP just would note that I think the April 13th Committee of the Whole minutes are the ones that we're looking for approval for.
Sorry, I apologize, April 13th.
And I wonder if that shouldn't be regular council meeting minutes.
Would be Committee of the Whole, would be on Committee of the Whole.
There you go.
Council, yeah. Council meeting. So April, so 2 weeks ago was
Committee of the Whole, of course. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Just want to catch that date change from the, rather than the 27th, it's the 13th, of course.
Thank you. I did not catch that. And today is April 27th. Any other corrections to the minutes? The minutes are dated the proper date, April 13th. All in favor, or can I have somebody to approve the minutes? Councillor Janot, all in favor? It's carried. Nobody is opposed. Okay. Presentations today, we have bike park, Menu, I may have said that wrong, Jasper Park and Cycling Association. Menu.
Good morning. No, you said that right. Hello,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it really short. I will share my screen. I have a quick presentation that I did last night. Oops, sorry. I didn't press the share screen button. Here we go. The Jasper Mountain Bike Skills Park. As some of you were on town council, this project started back in 2016. So first of all, we're talking about that tiny little parcel, that remnant parcel west of a parcel called GA on the zoning map on Connaught Drive at the west end of town. The original project has been changed, but this is what we're trying to accomplish. And this is the full project, and it will be a couple of phases. But yeah, we just want something fun, something safe, something designed to stay, something to be. So we contracted the best guy in the business in Canada, Jay Hoots. Something easy to maintain and something that can be seen as an asset for town. Some people get confused a bit in between. Is it like for the parks? Is it for town? Of course, it's for everyone. It's for the community. It's for the kids. It's for adults. It's for visitors. And a bit of background. So JPCA was started in 2012. In 2014, the town approved in principle the creation of the bike park. My predecessor as chair of JPCA, Matt Stainland, presented to council on April 26, 2016. So it was like 5 years and 1 day ago. It's been a long and bumpy road, but we really think it's worth it. A couple more dates. 2017, first draft of the Skills Park by J Hoots Inc. 2018, we got asked and we did give back, retrocede the parcel GA to the town of Jasper. By lack of momentum fundraising. What we didn't think of is that it would totally restart the process for Parks Canada. And now it wasn't an amendment to the project. We had to start from pretty much from start for this tiny little parcel. So that got done in 2019. Then COVID happened, and now in 2021, and trying to move on. Parks Canada has been really supportive. They ran an environmental assessment that is about to be approved. There's a couple of steps that they're asking us to take. So they're requesting an archaeological study of the site, and I just got the bad news last night that there's no budgeting, no funding available by Parks, and the liaison told me it would be like about $10,000 to $20,000 estimate for that study. It's still very new to me, so I'll get into it, and that will be subject to some other discussion. But what we can work on right now, and what JPCA is contacting the town of Jasper for, is the development permit application by the municipality of Jasper as being a leaseholder of the land, and the leaseholder authorization letter. So I contacted Bill Given for this matter, and the JPCA is asking municipality of Jasper to draft a lease operating agreement, depending on how we want to call it. In this operating agreement, we will be covering all the aspects related to the proper and sustainable operation of the bike park. From construction, so again, I want to be really clear, we're not talking about construction, we're not trying to get money to build the park, we're talking about how this park will be maintained and how it can stay sustainable for the foreseeable future and not be a total waste of time and money for everyone. We don't want to build a park if it's not going to be possible to maintain it. So the funding chapter will ask to include a capital component and an operating component to be approved by municipality of Jasper, of course. And this agreement, we'd like to make it valid for 1 year at a time, and every year will be reviewed, and modification or updates will be proposed and will have to be agreed by both parties. For the capital funds, again, the numbers I'm going to talk about are estimates that I got from contacting the town of Banff for the skate park, which is the only other project that I could find in a national park in Canada of this size for that kind of use. I don't want this bike park to be compared to Hinton Bike Park or Belmont Bike Park, because we're not talking about the same things at all. It won't be long trails, it won't be any crazy digging, any like crazy features. It is in town site, little fun park. So actually more comparable to a skate park, except we won't change the surface of the ground. So it won't be any concrete, won't be any, we're just using the land, we just keep the land, the soil the way it is. So we're requesting municipality of Jasper to approve the allocation of $3,500 annually towards a park reserve for as long as the bike park is owned by municipality of Jasper. And we will ask the municipality to decide with together on the terms to access these funds in the operational agreement. The unutilized capital funding will be carried over year to year, and the capital funds will be added to the asset management plan, and it will go into reserve to guarantee a sustainable operating for all in the foreseeable future. On the operating funds level, we would like to request the municipality of Jasper to approve the allocation of $2,000 annually towards the regular operating of the park. And the operating funds will cover the seasonal maintenance of the park. That will include the annual inspection done by Jehoots Incorporated, which is the contractor who will build the park and maintain it. They charge $850 for an annual inspection that takes about a day. That will also cover any eventual fire smart maintenance, and we would ask if we can have 1 day worth of municipal staff to do a bit of raking and maybe some basic ground maintenance. What I didn't write in there is we are really going to try to use mostly JPCA members' volunteer hours. We do not want to be relying on municipality staff, but it's something we need to put in the operation agreement to be approved by Parks Canada. We really don't want to get stuck in the future having to rely only on raising funds and reacting instead of planning. And the last aspect covered by operating funds will be garbage removal and disposal by the municipality of Jasper. All unutilized operating funds will not be carried over year to year and will remain at the municipality of Jasper. And the last request I have for today is it seems that Parks Canada doesn't have, or they request the plan site for the project to indicate the surveyed lots line to ensure that the proposed development is within the lot and does not encroach onto the CN lands, the municipal streets and sidewalk lands, or the adjacent parcel GA. So that was from Dave Kreisenbeck, who wanted to be clear about that before the project can be approved by Parks Canada. And yeah, I'd like to thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I want to thank you all, Mayor Ireland and all the municipal councillors, for making this mountain bike skills park a project that will bring, we think, a really valuable asset to the town of Jasper. It is on the Discovery Trail, which is a great trail. It will be, I hope, as used and valuable as Sentinel Park, the playground there, the other playgrounds in town, dog park, community garden, a place where people can meet, a place where people can enjoy safely, really healthy activity. A place that will not cost taxpayers thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah, like just something pretty unique. Like I did a bit of research. I cannot find another skills park in any national parks in Canada. So I already knew we were really special in Jasper. I think it's time to kind of join the biking hype that has been happening the last 10 years in Hinton and Belmont. I'm not comparing what we're trying to do with what's been doing over there, but there is definitely an axe on Highway 16 where people want to bike and bike a lot, and maybe we can make something to put Jasper on the map. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manu. Questions from council? Councillor McGrath.
I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for the presentation this morning. It was, I believe, about a year ago that my family and I were in the Hinton Skills Park, and I ran into Jay Hoots and I messaged you right away to be like, where is Jasper's bike park at, and where are we at in this process? So it's super exciting to have a presentation from you today and to fill us in on where the JPCA is at and all of the work that you've been doing behind the scenes on behalf of the community and our ability to recreate in a mountain bike skills park. So thank you so much. And I'm super supportive of a $5,500 a year request for operating and capital to make something like this happen for that level of funding is super exciting. So I can't wait to see this move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Wilson.
I'm also very excited that the fire is being stoked again on this project. As you know, in my opinion, I'd like to give you guys as much support as possible to actually see this through and instead of see it drop by the wayside again. Where do you see the project at the end of this year? You don't see there being construction this year, do you?
No, I'll be 100% on it. Like the email I got yesterday, like it was a bit of a punch in the face again. Yeah. It's been like a long bumpy road again. Like I have no idea how we're gonna generate $10,000 to $20,000 to run an archaeological study on such a tiny parcel. And I don't want to steer too much mud, but like I'm like, if that costs $10,000 to $20,000, like how much got spent on archaeological study for the whole of Whistler Campground? But that's another debate. It's just like one bad news after the next, and so I don't want to be too like pessimistic, but it's on one hand I have to keep going, and I have to make sure that we don't give up and we take one step at a time and fill out the paperwork when we get asked to. But I really yeah, I'll have to have a discussion with Parks Canada to know where that new requirement is coming from. They had 5 years to let us know. I was chatting with Matt Stanland two days ago. He had never been told that it would be an archaeological study request for this site, and again, like we could have been raising the money last year if we knew that it was going to be an extra 10 grand that we had to come up with. Like I wasn't even sure if I was going to mention it today, because it doesn't sound good to me. Like I'm asking for you guys to approve a budget, and then it's like pretty much like, well, don't worry too much about it because we actually won't need the money for another couple of years. Like that's not how I want to sound like, but it's been 5 years, and yeah, that's no construction in 2021.
No, understandable. May I follow up, Deputy Mayor McGrath, or sorry, Keller Epi? So what I was going to say was, I'm not sure that we've, as the developers or the owners currently of the what is it, Councillor Butler, have we had, sorry, let me just get my thoughts straight. Councillor Butler, may I ask you a question? Have we been required to do an archaeological study on the parcel that we are currently moving forward with on development?
I believe we have, but I'm not entirely sure. Mr. Given might know the situation there.
Okay.
Though different situation because it is a zoned and designated lot, and the one we're talking about here is not. So that may be a difference, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, I was just looking for maybe an opportunity to do some cost sharing with the JPCA if we're required to do it, and maybe and we're going to move forward with doing it. Maybe we could bear that cost. I'm not sure. Just something to look into, and incorporate all lots. And incorporate all lots in the archaeological study, but that's just brainstorming, I guess.
Councillor Demota.
Manu, it's so nice to see you present like this, and we go way back, and it's definitely a pleasure. Professional, really well done. Thank you very much for the information that you provided. Sorry about your punch in the face. I think there might be an opportunity for some help somewhere. I know that there's quite a few grants floating around, and maybe through the Culture and Rec Board or the Society of the Friends of Culture and Rec, or some other avenue within the municipality somewhere, we can maybe help with some grant writing. I can't promise anything, but we can look into it. And on another note, Mr. Given has put something in the chat box for us to consider. I'm not sure if someone wants to put a motion forward for admin to consider moving forward and making a recommendation to work with the Jasper Park Cycling Association. Thank you.
Other questions from you? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, and thank you, Manu, for that report. Very much appreciated. I was particularly impressed by the rather modest ask at the end of it. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but I really did appreciate that. And I wonder whether it might be possible for you to circulate the electronic version of that presentation so that we can have it in our own records. I have just two questions about it, and I'm not quite sure whether they can be directed to you, Manu, or to others. Firstly, with respect to the survey, I wonder whether, similar to Councillor Wilson's comment about the archaeological survey, the actual survey, are we going to be surveying the lots in any event with respect to the installation of services, at least for all three lots? So is there an opportunity to combine that necessary work? And so I can just leave that perhaps with Mr. Given to investigate, but a survey just for the bike park might be redundant if we have to do that in any event. And then my last comment is whether or not, and here I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the agenda, but I know that we have two matters to discuss later in the agenda that revolve around opportunities for public engagement, particularly the Culture and Recreation Services Review. And I wonder whether we might roll this specifically into that. It seems to me that it's an opportunity to build some public awareness and again, build a really welcoming attitude for this bike park when Manu and his crew are actually ready to start building, which hopefully will be soon. So I just leave that for council, whether we might want to include a public engagement piece as we move forward with this. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher MP.
Thank
Those
you.
are my.
Councillor Butler.
I echo the thanks of the other councillors for Manu. Appreciate you coming and presenting and giving us the background in particular, because it is the background I was particularly not aware of. So thanks for that. I do have one question in an area that I'm still a little confused. I appreciate the nature of the request. However, what I'm wondering is, what is your anticipated need with respect to initial construction? So the initial capital cost of constructing the park, and what is the source of that funds? Because if I understand correctly, your request of parks for an annual capital allocation would be for future upgrades to the park. And while $3,500 a year, which I think is the number you gave, is not a lot in 1 year, it would add up, of course. So where do you anticipate getting the funds for initial construction, and what do you see as the quantum of that requirement?
After Jehud designed the first draft of the park back in 2017, we started raising funds, and right now we have about $30,000 that got mostly funded back in 2017. When we realized that it was going to be a couple of delays, we stopped raising funds back in 2018 because we just found that it was wrong to ask people for money to build the park when we had no idea when that park would be built. So that's where we shifted towards doing the proper paperwork, following parks requests. We were like just slowly getting bigger and bigger. At some point, we realized maybe that project was too big for us, and it wasn't a good idea to move forward. But we changed the system. That's when I got in charge and of the bike park and of the JPCA. So we have $30,000 now. We have a couple of people who are ready to spend some time to apply for grants to match these funds. And we also have Jehud, who's being really supportive and wants to see that project happening. And he's been segmenting the project in different phases. The first phase would be pretty much I could try to go back to the original. Sorry, I'll share my screen again. So we could have 2 little pump tracks and a couple of jumps, and it would be we would have enough money to start this as soon as we're being approved. I don't know how to go back to. Sorry, I'll stop sharing. But anyways, yeah, we have the fundings now to be quickly matched by grants and to start what would be the first phase. And that would be like the way it would be for a couple of years. And then we would, of course, keep raising more money. Jehud's been really helpful in explaining how some municipalities have been really successful, how some municipalities have failed, and what to do and what not to do. And what we don't want to do is to ask for funding for the completion of the bike park. We only want to ask for funding from municipality for the maintenance of the bike park. So we don't want municipality of Jasper to have to add to the budget $1 for building the park. We want to have that park built by JPCA and then transmitted to municipality of Jasper to be the owner of it in exchange of funding the maintenance of the park. And that's why it would have to be added to the asset. But to answer your question, we have $30,000 that could be turned into 60,000, which would be enough to cover first phase, granted that we get approved by Parks Canada. And now we have to decide if we spend 10 or whatever they charge us of this $30,000 on the archaeological study to move on forward, or if we try to raise some funds another way. But before we want to go public, because we also got asked by Parks Canada to stay quiet about the subject and not to communicate too much until they approve us. So that's why I'm a bit of a, I find myself in a bit of a pickle there, not being able to go fully public on what's going on, while having to ask you guys for support, while not looking like I'm going behind Parks' back to move things, even though I've been asked to be quiet. So it's a tough situation, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I just don't want the project to die either. Because for me, we own on a bank account $30,000 that so far we don't deserve because we've done nothing with it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Manu, I have a question for you. In order to move forward, in your slide, you said Parks Canada is requesting the following steps for approval. Development permit application by the municipality of Jasper, holder of the land, and the leasehold authorization letter. When do you need that by?
Well, again, with yesterday's email, it doesn't look like there's a great rush. The earlier, the better, of course. I was really hoping that with the communication I had, pretty much I got told we need the ground to be ready for just a bit of light digging to do the archaeological study, and then we should be ready to move on. And now I get told that this is not what's going to happen at all. So I don't know, like really like spring of 2021 would be great, but the earlier I get this paper, the earlier I can transmit that to Park and show them that I'm doing everything I get asked for, and then the ball is in their court. The more I delay it is, and the more the chances that nothing happens in 2022 either. So I've seen how quick it goes from fall to spring to summer. Everybody gets busy and nobody's got time, and then it's pushed back to fall. So I'd rather have those papers before busy summer season. So sometimes in May or June would be great, so I can transfer it before everybody goes on holidays.
Thank you, Manu.
You're
Councillor.
welcome.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Harampy. I'm curious about 5 points, and I have 5 points written down that would be prepped for a motion, but not putting a motion on the table yet, to make sure that these 5 points are in alignment with council's wishes. The first would be to approve the use of GA for Skills Park. The second would be to direct administration to work with JPCA to draft a lease agreement for GA. The third would be to support the JPCA with a combined operating and capital budget of $5,500 a year. The fourth would be to investigate surveying on GC, GB, and GA to see if we might be able to have this all done at once. And the fifth point would be Mayor Ireland's point about rolling the Skills Park into the public engagement piece of the Culture and Recreation Review.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. Mr. Given, and then Manu.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Harampy. Yeah, I think a motion like that would be really helpful to administration. One item to clarify is that the parcel that we're discussing is actually the remnant parcel west of GA. And so we need to be explicit in that. It is not the GA parcel. That is separate, and so not under consideration here. So I think that should be included. I think with all the rest of those, that kind of motion would give administration exactly the standing that we need to be able to move forward on the request. And I just would note too that in discussion with Mr. Greathead, the survey, I think the information that Manu received comes across as probably the worst case scenario, but in administration's experience, it doesn't necessarily need to be at the level that Parks was communicating it there. I think they probably were doing their best due diligence to make sure that they didn't undersell and set somebody up for a bad expectation. But certainly administration sees the need to do the archaeological survey as something that we could incorporate, almost gift in kind, essentially, if council directed us to do that, because our experience has been that it is not maybe as challenging as has been made out or might have come across in the presentation. And we would have the ability to incorporate that with the other projects that are underway as council referenced. So that part of it, I don't believe is a significant barrier.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Manu?
No, same than Mr. Given. I just wanted to make sure we're not talking about parcel GA. We're talking about the remnant parcel west of parcel GA.
Thank you, Manu. Councillor Demota, then Councillor Butler.
Yes, with regards to Councillor McGrath's third point, maybe this would probably be a question for Mr. Given through you, Mrs. Deputy Mayor. To Mr. Given, where would we be with a commitment in principle right now, as we've just approved capital and operating budgets for 2021. My perception, this would be for the next budget cycle and going forward. So maybe just some advice and direction from you.
Mr. Given?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempy. Yeah, Councillor Demota, I think if council was to give administration direction, first off, that would give us the ability to go and develop the lease agreement between the committee and the municipality. Defining the terms that council wishes us to develop that lease agreement in would be the first step. I think 2021, if anything, will be a developmental year, and it's likely that the operational costs and sort of the ongoing maintenance capital, I'll call it, wouldn't start until 2022. I see Manu nodding that he would be in agreement with that. And so I don't think that there'd be an impact in this budget year, but really the point of having that in the motion would be to give us clear direction on what should be incorporated in any lease agreement if council wishes us to develop one.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much. I'm certainly in support of the concept of bike park. I think it would be a really valuable addition to the community, both for residents and visitors. However, I cannot help but expressing the suggestion that we take a little bit of time. I really do respect the practice we have been developing of moving forward, even in committee of the whole, with motions, and that is as it should be, and it's appropriate. However, this is the first time we've seen any of this material. I think that an approach to request that administration bring back to council or to committee for consideration recommendations for next steps would be appropriate. I struggle with the idea that we, having first laid eyes on quite a number of variables within this discussion, that we're already, understandably with our enthusiasm for this, talking about making motions, and in particular motions with financial implications. We just passed a budget, and as Councillor Demota said, I think we cannot honestly even begin a process of committing funds, because the budget that would commit those funds will not be ours to pass. So I am a little concerned at getting the cart before the horse here, and I would prefer a motion that suggests or that directs administration to consider options, perhaps have some conversations with Parks Canada around some of the nuances with respect to the mechanics of what a lease might look like, and come back at a future committee meeting to more closely define what our next steps ought to be, rather than start to define those steps here in this meeting today when we just heard the information for the first time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Councillor Butler covered most of what I was going to say in any event, but I agree that a direction to administration to work with the Jasper Park Cycling Association to develop what I think is an operating agreement. It's been called a lease a couple of times, but I don't think it's a lease. I think it's an operating agreement. But in any event, a direction that they commence that work and come back to us with it. I think that there is already extant a use provision in principle, that is, a previous council authorized the use of the land in principle. I see Mr. Given wants to respond to that, and that's fine. I'm hoping that that still stands. Again, it's not necessarily our role to determine what the use of land will be, so I'm hesitant to go beyond saying that we would approve of that, other than in principle. And as for the amount of support, I agree with Councillor Butler that we will see what comes back by way of recommendation in the operating agreement. And then finally, if we are going to put this as part of a public engagement process, with which I agree, I don't think we should be making decisions before we even start that process. I think we have to let the public know that their input is of value to us, and so we can give some direction but not make final decisions until we see what comes back from administration and we see what comes back from whatever efforts we make in terms of public engagement.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Mr. Given.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempe. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for council. I had to do a little bit of background research, and with the assistance of the municipal team, they were able to find a few motions related to this, and there is a bit of a complexity in that. I think the previous proposal, as Manu highlighted, was for a much larger project that was over onto the GA site. The scale has been changed here, but and council had previously provided its support, I think in principle, for that larger project that was on to parcel GA. In 2018, council actually rescinded its 2016 motion of support for the GA scale project, for the larger scale project. In 2018, council made a motion to rescind a previous motion, canceling the municipality of Jasper's request for a temporary discretionary use for parcel GA. So that was all administration was able to find for council actively making motions related to designation of any kind of land. So at this stage, it is clear that council has rescinded its request for a temporary discretionary use permit for parcel GA. What I think would be helpful, and council can decide if you want to do this after some public consultation or before, or how you might handle that. But I think at some stage, we do need some clarity of council making a motion to designate a certain parcel. And here we're discussing the remnant parcel west of GA, I think is how we would term it, for this use. Because that way administration would have the ability to say, municipal council has provided its approval for this use in our letter that we would send to parks and in our application for a temporary discretionary use permit. So I just want to provide that clarity that I think we do need some kind of motion, and whether that motion happens today or if council directs administration to do public consultation on that parcel, and then council could consider making a motion subsequent to the completion of that public consultation. But just in any case, I don't believe that there is a standing motion that says that Jasper Municipal Council is supportive of moving forward with a bike park on a specific parcel in that area, because that previous one was rescinded.
Thank you, Mr. Given, for the clarity of that. Do I have a Councillor McGrath and then Councillor Demoda?
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempe. I would like to present a motion that council direct administration to approve the use of, that council direct administration to work with the JPCA to draft a lease or operating agreement to come back to a future council meeting, and that council approve the use of the site for a skills park. We can revisit the operating and capital budget discussions at a later date, as we've all shown support of $5,500. I don't see that being problematic in the future. And we can decide at a later agenda item whether we would roll the skills park into public engagement or not. I believe that it would also be of interest, and I'm not sure if the wording should be archaeological study or survey for the third part of the motion, to read that council direct administration to investigate, as Mr. Given expressed, the archaeological study or surveying to see if we would be able to do that as a gift in kind for the JPCA.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for your motion. Councillor McGrath has put a motion on the table. Debate, Councillor Demoda.
Well, I do want to support some motion to advance this and have the municipality working with the cycling association to take our steps going forward. So there is a public consultation piece there, and Councillor McGrath has addressed that. I'm just wondering, just the wording of the motion, if that it's reflective of that being a component to making a decision going forward. I was a little unclear on that.
Councillor McGrath, and then Councillor Butler, then Councillor Janelle.
That could be a friendly amendment that someone adds to this motion if they wish for public engagement to be rolled into the culture and recreational study review, or the public engagement of the culture and recreation review. I'm flexible on that. It doesn't, we could either do it. I think the community is well aware this has been in progress for many, many years, but public engagement is always certainly welcomed and helpful.
Councillor Demoda, you may respond.
Well, yes, and I'd just like to follow up because I can't remember, why we rescinded, but I was always I was under the perception that the park was continuing to go forward, and we've had some delays because of COVID. So I always thought that once we kind of approved it in principle, that everything was still in motion. So I apologize. I forgot what the principle behind the rescinding was of that motion, and it probably had to do with something with the services. Anyway. Yeah, my friendly amendment, I guess it would be to approve a bike park in the parcel area that's been recommended, and with, I don't know, I guess with, depending on what comes out of public consultation. So however, if you want to word that. Approve it in principle with respect to public consultation.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. This is exactly the problem. We are attempting to draft a motion on the fly, and sometimes that's necessary and it's good, but in past practice, we have generally received with thanks and gratitude a presentation like this, and then allowed ourselves some time to consider what we think next steps should be. I can't support a motion, for example, I couldn't support a motion that references drafting a lease or operating license or anything like that, because as Mayor Ireland said, that would be putting the cart before the horse when we haven't even had the public engagement process to consider whether this is something we ought to be doing. And there are areas of unclarity, lack of clarity with respect to what kind of a lease license agreement is even needed. We don't have precedents that I'm aware of of dealing with a remnant of land as opposed to a parcel of land. So there's a lot going on here, and I would prefer to see a motion, as I said, that simply approves in principle the use of the land and directs administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting with suggestions for next steps to facilitate future development. I think that's all we need to say here. It moves forward, and administration would have a chance to come back to us and say, here's what we think rolling this out might look like. And then we're not cornering ourselves or cornering the administration. I don't think we have to say right now what a public engagement process would look like. We know we always do public engagement on these issues. So again, a motion that references even drafting a lease or agreement is premature in my view.
Councillor McGrath and Councillor Wilson.
If Councillor Butler would like to propose that as a friendly amendment to the motion that I have on the table, that would be acceptable, and administration would return to a future council meeting for us to move forward with. If that is the time that council needs to make this decision, it would be, moving it forward to that point today would be what we need to do, and to get it at a regular meeting in the future from administration's recommendations. And with the guidance that administration has already provided us today, I think that would be successful in moving this project forward.
Councillor Butler, are you making that friendly amendment?
Well, I'm happy to do so. I think it looks like quite a different motion. I'm not clear on the wording of the motion, so I'm not clear on exactly where I would amend it. Maybe if Councillor McGrath reread her motion, then we could look at what we want to change or delete to add a friendly amendment. I'm wondering if it isn't. I'm happy to work with whatever process, but I'm not sure that you can amend a motion by really restating the motion altogether. I'm just not sure where we're at procedurally here.
Mayor Ireland. I welcome
Thank you. I
you.
was doing my best to raise a pen to signify a point of order. Councillor Butler raises some good issues, but if it is in fact a friendly amendment, it is not amendment by Councillor Butler. The mover of the motion, in this case, Councillor McGrath, simply accepts the suggestion as a friendly amendment to her motion. It continues to be her motion. And I would be, I think, content to vote in favor of that motion if I fully understand it. I think the direction initially is to direct administration to work with the JPCA and come back with recommendations for an agreement moving forward. And secondarily, to have council confirm at this time that it is prepared to accept the proposed use of that remnant parcel in principle. And if that is the only change, I think that is a friendly amendment. I think the only real change there is adding the word in principle, which does not, in my view, change the nature of the motion, but others might have a different view. But if that is the motion that is now before us, accepted by Councillor McGrath, then I am prepared to vote in favor of that motion. But I think everybody has to understand what the motion is.
Councillor McGrath.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. As you were stating it, you were reading my words with the addition of in principle. And if that is what council needs to be in alignment and to move this forward today, I think that that would be an excellent opportunity for the JPCA to have advancement at this meeting and for us to have what we need in the future.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Demoda.
Well, no, I'll just pass, but I am full support of the motion as I guess not amended, but as altered. And anyway, yeah, I'll pass and just let you know that I do support the motion as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Demoda.
Thank you. Yeah. me, and I really appreciate the participation, and I like these kind of spitballing sessions, even though sometimes it could be a little cumbersome. Great work, and yeah, I don't mind doing these things on the fly, and I think it's healthy for us too. It's a good form of communication. So thank you for bringing that forward, and I'm ready to vote.
Councillor Janot, I apologize. I saw your hand earlier and I skipped over you. Do you have something you wanted to add?
I probably have lots to add, but we're fairly well deep into the story here, so I'll bypass. Quick review of the our town map. It indicates that it's zone recreation, so it's an appropriate use for sure. I would just want to remind people that because we live in a national park, we live in a very precious environment, in a very pristine environment, a very special environment, and sometimes some of the things that we expect in this town may not be available to us. And this is not one of them, however, but on one hand, it might be one of them because this tends to deteriorate the soil quite quickly. However, they've indicated, Mr. Manu has indicated that they're going to do the well maintained, and it's going to be smaller than most parks. So it is recreation, it is outdoors, it's an individual sport, so it definitely support the opportunity for anybody. I do have a question for Mr. Manu. He said that it's open to the public, but the quick review of his website indicates that you need a membership, so need clarification there. And the last thing I have is you didn't mention anything about insurance and liability. So where does that lie? It's recreation land that's owned by us, but what about the liability? Those are the questions, comments. They don't need to be answered because most of that is being left to administration. I do support the project, and I support administration moving in conjunction with the Bike Park Association to make this viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janot. So the motion, friendly amendment, are we all ready to agree on? I can ask Councillor Butler.
I just like to have the motion reread. I'm sorry. And the reason I'm asking this is that I believe that Councillor McGrath did reference draft agreement or something, and I take it that that is no longer in the motion. The only change was the addition of the word principal was not the only change. So I'd like the motion reread. I believe I'm in favor, but again, clarity is important.
I was going to ask that, Minot.
I don't know if I'm allowed to make that request, but before any motion goes any further, would it be a good idea to name that parcel, maybe, so everybody knows exactly what we're talking about? Because as Councillor Janot mentioned, like on the zoning map, it's just dark green and it doesn't have a name. That was just my question. Should council decide on a name for that parcel before adding it to any motion? And is it like a much bigger thing to add to the zoning map than what we're talking about right now?
Councillor Demota, and then.
Well, just so everyone's aware, like the public's aware, and maybe Manu as well. This is committee of the whole. We're not allowed to make this. We're not authorized to make decisions here. So this is a recommendation for council to decide at a regular meeting. So those things I think can be tweaked or rediscussed. So this is kind of almost a figurative type motion until we can get into something that's a little more concrete, as far as I understand.
Councillor McGrath, can you read?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, Mayor Ireland did reread, and I just want to make sure that when he reread it, the check mark that I put down next to what he stated was that council direct administration to work with the JPCA and it did, Councillor Butler, have the words draft a lease or agreement to come back to council. So if that's a piece that you don't agree with, we should decide how we want this motion to be worded, because you are in agreement of it coming back to council, and what wording is it that you would prefer to see? The second part of the motion was to approve the use in principle for a skills park.
Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I didn't write down my motion, but my recollection is that it was a recommendation, pardon me, that administration work with JPCA and return with a draft recommended agreement.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillor Butler. Okay.
I draft recommended agreement is non-specific enough to meet my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
I can read this now, just so everyone has full clarity, that council directed administration to work with the JPCA to draft a recommended agreement to come back to council and to approve the use of the site for a skills park in principle.
Deputy Mayor Kelleher, and just at the risk and to be very direct, the site, the remnant site west of parcel GA. I think that level of specificity is probably what we need, and that's I think what Manu was referencing, but that would be helpful to administration just to add that small part when we say the site, the remnant parcel west of GA.
The second part of my motion reads that council approve the use of the remnant site west of GA in principle.
Thank you. Any other further debate? Did I see your hand, Councillor Wilson? Okay. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None. That is carried. So we will expect that back at a committee of whole in the future from administration team. I'll leave it in your hands, Mr. Gibbon. Next presentation. Thank you, Minot. Are you still with us? For a great presentation. We look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time. Thank you. Very, very appreciated. And I'll be happy to answer any questions today or any other day. Kayla has my info. Yeah, please reach. And thank you again.
Thank you. Next presentation update. Mr. Gibbon, on our current situation with our ECC.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor Kelleher, MP. And to be clear, there is no currently activated ECC, but administration is regularly monitoring the COVID situation. And there are some actions that we wanted to ensure that council is aware of and the community. First, with respect to COVID numbers, the most recent data from Alberta Health Services that is posted to their website shows that Jasper, number of active cases has declined in Jasper. We're now reporting 8 active cases, where I believe last week when I spoke to you, we were at 23 active cases. So that is positive news. But I don't share that in a sense that there is an opportunity now to let up on maintaining public health guidance and following those regulations. As we see in Wood Buffalo, the town of Fort McMurray, the urban area of the municipality of Wood Buffalo, has the highest number of cases per capita. They have over 1,300 cases there. The local council has recently declared a state of local emergency to give them extraordinary powers, which I would imagine they may use to enact further restrictions at the local level. So it is a reminder, and should be a reminder to all of us here in Jasper, that while our cases are trending downward, that we still need to maintain vigilance in following those public health orders, so that we can continue to protect our community and continue to make Jasper a welcoming and inviting place for visitors to come and for our locals to live safely. Additionally, I just want to provide an update to council that the municipality of Jasper is participating in the Government of Alberta's rapid testing initiative. The fire department led by the fire department and our community and family services department. They have individually submitted applications which have both been approved to allow us to deploy rapid COVID testing for frontline workers with the municipality. And so this is an opportunity for us to ensure that our most valuable resource, our staff, have rapid testing available to them on a regular basis. That program will start shortly and has planned to run until September, or I suppose as conditions warrant. But I think a great opportunity for us to utilize tools that are at our disposal to do what we can within our control as a municipality to A, protect our staff, and B, ensuring that we're doing what we can to limit the spread of COVID-19 in the community as much as possible. I would take the opportunity to note that this program is also available widely to other employers. And in fact, the province just this week announced that they had reduced the barriers to participation in the program. They had, and this is the condition that we submitted under, they had previously required that participation in the program required it to be run by a qualified individual. And the qualifications were admittedly actually quite accessible. We are partnering with one of the local pharmacies to provide oversight to our program. But the province on Monday reduced that barrier even more, making it much, much easier for any business that wished to apply to the province to enact rapid testing for their frontline workers and staff. It is much easier to do that. So, certainly as the municipality, we're happy to be taking a lead and doing what we can for our staff and would encourage other businesses in the community to explore that opportunity through the government of Alberta to deploy rapid testing. And with those two things and the reminder to stay safe, to be kind to one another and wash your hands, that's the update that I provide for today.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for that update. It's quite exciting to know that there's rapid testing and that all employers are able to access this. And I think we get this out on our Facebook or through communication on our website so that other employers are able to get the information of who they should contact within the government. I think that is great for Jasper. Thank you for that. Questions for Mr. Gibbon? Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Moving on, business arising from the minutes of April 13th. No business arising. Director's report, Community and Family Services. Mr. Gibbon, is that you or Mrs. Waxer?
This will be Ms. Waxer, I believe, as she's providing her director's report on the service area and all the activity that's been happening over there. So I will turn it over to Ms. Waxer.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Welcome, Mrs. Waxer. Good morning.
I thought about my report and looked at providing the information in a different way. So I'm just sort of going to go over that. That Community and Family Services has been in this last year or more, been focusing on its efforts on supporting residents disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this support has come in a variety of ways. We have economic support through the childcare services. We've been able to provide high quality childcare that allows people who are able to get back into the workforce to work safely, to work while their children are safely cared for. We've also received external funding from the federal government through the Canada Emergency Community Support Fund, through Arden, and through an anonymous donor to provide funding to assist people in meeting their basic needs in this difficult time. And we have also offered the community the volunteer income tax tax program, providing individuals with support in getting their income tax statements prepared, and so that they have their income tax returns and are eligible for social supports. We've also been doing lots of social support for residents in this time. We have offered parenting support programs through the all virtually. That we've offered the really high quality Circle of Security parenting program for a variety for parents dealing with children from birth to teens, as well as special programs from the more local authorities, including recently Ainsley Graham, who presented on guiding children through times of change. We have also, through community outreach services, provided social connection type programming for every life stage. The new parent support group in the early childhood life stage, chaos, a program for children who are at home and need social connection. We've offered, we've created craft kits and had them delivered. Anna, through the Youth and Teen program, has offered a weekly rec room and youth community helpers. The young adult outreach worker has done lots with a community helpers program for adults, and through seniors we've been doing the coffee connections and coffee at Pine Grove. We've also been working considerably, putting considerable effort into welcoming and inclusive community work through the Newcomer Network, the Immigration Coalition, and through our Measuring Municipal Inclusion program. And so that was just recapping it in a slightly different way. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Waxer, and thank you to you and your team. I enjoyed reading your report and all the great work you're doing. So send thanks to all your staff, and especially in this time with COVID and all the new programs they have created. Good feedback from our community on this. Questions for Mrs. Waxer, Councillor McGrath?
Not a question, Mrs. Waxer, but a continuation of Councillor Keller-Hrampy's gratitude to you and your team and your departments for doing what they do day in and day out for the people of Jasper. I recognize, while I'm sitting comfortably, the Friday before Easter weekend at my home, safe, that your team is working diligently over the weekend, housing people in isolation hotels, and really the work that your team is doing for the people that are affected by COVID-19 in our community, on top of the regular work that you guys have done for so many years. So thank you very much to you, and please pass along the gratitude to your entire team.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any other questions for Mrs. Waxer on her report? Mayor Ireland, then Councillor Demoda.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hrampy. I'll just continue on that current vein. Particular thanks with respect to the isolation hotels. I have had opportunity to speak to a couple of people who have been required to take that opportunity, and I can say from their perspective, really deeply appreciated. And credit also to the hotel. I understand that the level of food that is provided has been exceptional. People are, as difficult as that isolation has been, they've been well cared for. So thank you for your efforts, Mrs. Waxer, to get that going. I do have two items that I'd like to raise, just sort of generally to have you take away and maybe consider with your staff. I noticed that there is some reliance on funding from Alberta Justice's civil forfeiture grant. I have concerns about that and where it might lead. To me, it is not necessarily the most principled approach. And I wonder how deep we might get in accepting funding from that. And I see in your report, part of the goal of the grant is to identify essentially that crime is the problem. And it seems to me that many of the social problems that we face here and elsewhere are a result of either mental health issues or poverty issues or some combination. But there seems to be an attitude that if you want the grant funding, you have to identify that crime is the problem. And I have concerns about that, and I'm happy at another time to share with council my concerns generally about the civil forfeiture fund, which is in many ways just a tax on questionable activities without any proof of crime. And finally, I really do appreciate the expansion of the Snow Angels program, but I would ask again that maybe you consider with your staff whether the current name, the Ninjas program, is appropriate. Apart from perhaps being cultural appropriation, my limited understanding of Japanese history is that ninjas were the covert, unethical mercenary operators of the samurai. It's not a very warm and welcoming term for those wonderful volunteers who go out to help our community. So I just suggest that a rebranding of the rebrand might be something that you would consider.
Thank you for those comments. And I would say that I completely agree with you that I think the root of crime is definitely in the social issues, and which is why I've really dedicated a lot of my efforts and time into inclusion work and ensuring that social supports are in place so that people are supported in living healthy, productive lives and not drawn into the world of crime. I agree with you about that.
Sorry. Councillor Demota?
Right. Mrs. Waxer, thank you so much again, and appreciate all the level of detail in the report. And as you have one of the largest departments, there's lots of information coming out of it. I was particularly impressed by section 2.1. The community consultation and the work that the community team addressed with the social trends and then the steps that were taken to address some of that. And I think in these times that those are important, and commend you and the department as well as the community team for that work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other questions for Mrs. Waxer? Thank you again, Mrs. Waxer, for your report, and our gratitude to you and your staff for all the work you do. And hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Policy and governance. Council strategic priorities. Any councillors wish to speak to our strategic plan? If not, before we start into new business, as we have several items, I'm going to call a 10-minute recess, and we will come back to meeting at, well, actually, I'll give you 12 minutes at 11 o'clock. See everybody at 11 o'clock. Awesome. I will call the meeting back to order. New business, Emergency Management Authority, Mr. Given.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Kelleher MP. I'm going to present this. Director Van Tighem isn't able to be here today. For Council's consideration, administration is recommending that Council direct us to establish an immediate short-term solution to enable the municipality of Jasper to operate under the Alberta Emergency Management Act, and that Council provide further direction for us to work in collaboration with Parks Canada to develop a permanent solution to enable the application of the Act within the boundaries of municipality on an ongoing basis. In terms of background, the Alberta Emergency Management Act is the act which gives Alberta municipalities their authority to act in certain emergency situations and governs how we prepare for emergencies. The Act is also supported by a number of regulations which are developed by the minister. And in January 1st of 2020, new local authority emergency management regulations came into force, which triggered a number of reviews for municipalities across the province. And Mr. Van Tighem had been working with authorities at the Alberta Emergency Management Agency to examine our system here. In 2019, following the Waterton Wildland fire back in 2017, the 2019 debrief identified challenges that happened for the community of Waterton as a result of their location in a national park. And that led to further exploration by the Emergency Management Agency, which uncovered that Jasper and Banff did not have the necessary municipal authorities that we might have thought that we had in place, including the legal authorities to act in the event of a major emergency. Both, as you all well know, Banff and Jasper have land transfer agreements that speak to the various municipal authorities that have been granted to each community. But it has been discovered that the emergency management was not included in that enumerated list of authorities that were delegated to the municipality. That being the case, Parks is still essentially the responsible authority. And while it is possible for Parks to be the responsible authority under the Alberta Act, it does mean that Parks would have full control and liability, and the municipal council could only really consult with the superintendent, who would be the one who would be ultimately responsible for declaring a state of local emergency. Obviously, this situation is untenable in that it restricts municipal council's autonomy, recognizing that there may be other situations that would be emergencies where council may wish to act, or disasters that would not necessarily implicate the operation of the national park outside the town site boundaries. So, and again, I think many of you may be aware of this past history. The municipality worked with the parks superintendent to draft a one-year agreement that was put into place by the superintendent in May 2020. As a result of our annual emergency management audit by the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, who are doing their review as a result of the new regulations, it came to light that the Alberta agency does not consider our temporary agreement as valid, and therefore we are required to enter into a more robust and long-lasting agreement or resolution to the situation with Parks Canada. The Alberta Emergency Management Agency identified three major opportunities, appropriate ways to address this. Enabling the application of the Alberta Emergency Management Act within the boundaries of the municipality of Jasper, or for parks to delegate specific responsibilities and authorities to the municipal council under the National Parks Act or some other federal legislation, or three, to contract with the municipality and fund the municipality of Jasper to maintain an emergency management program, while authority for decision-making and liability and accountability would continue to rest with parks. I think everyone's preferred solution would be, number one, to enable the application of the Alberta Act within the boundaries of the municipality of Jasper. Administration has had some initial discussions with parks. They are supportive of finding a more long-lasting resolution that would provide council with the municipal autonomy that is appropriate for a self-governing local council. And so what we're here today is essentially to raise this issue to council's attention and to ask council to formally make a motion to provide us direction to do this, so that when we're engaging with parks and other entities in the province, it's clear that A, council is aware, and B, that council is supportive of us resolving this issue. Should we be able to identify an appropriate resolution of the issue, we would bring that forward to council, obviously, for appropriate approvals as required. So the motion that we're asking for today is simply direction to administration to engage in this work, which admittedly we have already taken those initial steps to doing. And that's the report, Councillor Keller-Rampe.
Thank you, Mr. Given. It's very important that we resolve this. We're coming on fire season, and we certainly need to be able to have emergency protocols in place. Questions for Mr. Given? Thoughts from council? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Given, for the report. I have maybe 3 questions for clarification. So the first is on the second page of the report, you reference in the second paragraph of the first full paragraph, both Banff and Jasper have a land transfer agreement, which I understand. And then later on, you say in the last paragraph before the discussion, what is required is to have Parks Canada update the current governance agreement. So when you refer to the governance agreement, is that the same as the land transfer agreement?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Butler. I would actually defer to Mayor Ireland on that. I may get those terms crossed up, but in essence, it is the foundational document. The document that we mean is the document that spells out the delegated authorities that parks have transferred formally to the municipality. And so,
right.
Apologies if the terminology isn't clear there.
Well, no, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to nitpick on terminology. I am simply trying to understand exactly what is the agreement, wherein lies the concern. So I take it that means the same thing, and that's fine, because it is both the governance agreement and a land transfer agreement. So then, and Deputy Mayor, is it all right if I continue? Good point. So understanding that, and I take it to be the case that we're essentially talking about, as you said, the foundational agreement that essentially delineates what are the governmental responsibilities that lay with the town of Jasper and the municipality of Jasper. And if that agreement, foundational as it is, does not cede that authority to the municipality, then I'm wondering what kind of short-term solution we could even have. And if we establish a short-term solution, why wouldn't that be the solution? What are you envisioning there with a short-term solution if the solution that we had in place isn't adequate?
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Keller-Rampe. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Butler. At this point, administration wants to ensure that we have maximum flexibility. If it turns out that there was something that needed to go to federal cabinet for approval, or was going to be a longer process that was tied up in something else, we didn't want to delay identifying potential solutions if necessary for the 2021 season, if it appeared that we may have to go through a longer process. Early indications are that we may be able to find permanent solutions on a fairly rapid basis, but we want to ensure that we cover the potential that something unknown comes up and we ended up in the federal apparatus more than we expect to at this stage. So really, it is the way the motion is set out is to provide some mitigating opportunity for us to find an interim solution if necessary. But administration's preference and recommendation to council would be, of course, that we go for a more permanent solution as the primary opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Butler, follow up.
Very much for those answers. And I suppose it leaves me with the impression that it is hard to envision a permanent solution that would not involve revisiting that foundational agreement. If something was left out, if something was missed, then that's probably what we need to do. And I take your point that that itself could take a considerable amount of time, and that we need something shorter term in place. So thanks very much.
Other questions for Mr. Given? Councillor McGrath and Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hrampe, and thank you, Mr. Given and your team for bringing this forward. It's been a question since I was elected anyways, and we were all uncertain for so long. So thank you for uncovering what needs to be done and for putting us on the path for success for this topic.
Mayor Ireland.
I am quite prepared to make the motion directing administration to get to work with our partners in this to create both a short-term and a long-term solution. Just for, well, I'll make the motion perhaps and speak to it. And I would make the motion in essence as it is written in the request for a decision, but with the addition of the words in the second bullet to work in collaboration with Parks Canada and Alberta Emergency Management to develop a permanent solution. And one of the problems here is that in the past 3 years in particular, led principally by our director, Mr. Van Tighem, we had numerous discussions with all three parties, and I thought we were closer to a solution than it turned out that we were. And we had an interim solution signed by the superintendent, which seemed to cover the ground, and later found that the province took a different view after we had been months and months into that agreement, which was beyond disappointing. But to imagine this getting resolved by dealing with Parks Canada is not going to happen. We have to involve the province, and we are to some extent stuck in the middle. And if I could just briefly address earlier points made by Councillor Butler, we don't have, in fact, a land transfer agreement, but I think Mr. Given can be forgiven for that terminology. We have a governance agreement, but there is a real difference between the agreement that establishes the creation of local governments in Jasper and in Banff. In Banff, it was a direct two-party agreement with Parks Canada that was enabled under then existing provincial legislation, the Parks Town Act, which was repealed after Banff was created. But that is a two-party government-to-government agreement between Banff and the federal government, whereas in our case, we have an agreement to establish local government with the federal government, but then we're created separately by order in council of the province. So it's not apples to apples. However, they found a solution in Banff, which is something called an instrument of entrustment, where the federal minister responsible has effectively entrusted Banff to carry out the duties that the superintendent would otherwise carry out. And that probably has application in our circumstance, but why we haven't been able to get to that in 3 years of trying is quite beyond me. But I fully agree with the suggestion by Mr. Given that council direct administration to really get busy to find an immediate solution to this, both short-term and long-term in my view. And so I'm happy to make that motion and will support it with, as I say, the addition of keeping Alberta Emergency Management Association in that loop, because ultimately we can't move forward in a realistic way without having the province on side with whatever agreement we come to with the federal government.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Any other debate? I'll call the question. The committee directs administration to establish an immediate short-term solution to enable the municipality of Jasper to operate under the Alberta Emergency Act and work to collaboration with Parks Canada and the Emergency Management Association to develop a permanent solution to enable the application of the Emergency Management Act within the boundaries of the municipality of Jasper as an ongoing basis. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Given. Thank you, Council. Mr. Gibbon, Jasper Connaught Offsite Services.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. Council, in the ongoing work on Jasper, the Connaught Offsite Services, we're reaching another milestone as we're bringing forward a recommendation for the award of the request for proposals for detailed design for the utility installation project. Council previously saw a preliminary feasibility report that provided design options. This is the detailed construction design and construction oversight part of the project, and this is prerequisite to moving forward with the tender for actual construction, which would follow. As Council knows, in March 2021, Council directed administration to continue developing the project and provided upfront budget for project costs of $350,000. And then I believe at that same meeting, administration was also directed to bring forward a borrowing bylaw and to incorporate the $3.647 million in capital costs into the budget. Administration, supported by Colliers project leaders, conducted a RFP process for engineering services. That process was posted on the Alberta Purchasing Connection site, and the submissions were reviewed using a 2-envelope system, where the panel first reviewed the submissions on a technical basis, and you can see the criteria there. The top items, project understanding, corporate qualifications, proponents team, and project delivery, formed the majority of the points, and that was on the technical side of their submission. And then price formed 20% of the total points awarded. And the price envelope was only opened after the technical submissions had been reviewed and scored. After that process, out of the 3 proponents, administration is recommending that council award the detailed design and project management to WSP Engineering in the amount of $244,800 as the highest evaluated proponent of the submissions. And with that, I will turn it over to council for any questions or motions.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Questions for Mr. Gibbon? Mayor Ireland, then Councillor Demoda.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for that. I really appreciate the approach taken, and the way it's described, the 2-envelope approach is commendable. So thank you for that. I am simply curious in a general sense whether there was any threshold on the scoring. So the maximum points were just under 76%. Going in, was there a sense that some minimum standard had to be achieved before you would award the contract to any party?
Good question, Mayor Ireland. No, I don't believe that we had a minimum threshold. That is a practice that's used in some RFP processes, where a minimum technical threshold might be developed or proposed and included as a part of the submission package ahead of time, so that all parties would know that. I don't believe that that's one that was utilized here, but I can say that we were confident that all of the applicants would be fully capable of doing the project, and so we were very, very satisfied with the submissions that we received.
Mr. Gibbon. Councillor Demola.
No, everything's answered. I appreciate it. I enjoyed reading about the process. Thank you.
Can I have somebody to make a motion to direct administration enter into agreement with WSP for the detailed design and project management of the installation of water and sewer services with a contract value of $244,800?
And Deputy Mayor Keller MP, before somebody makes that motion, with my apologies, my suggestion would be that this should be committee recommend, council approve, because this, committee isn't deciding, and certainly there should be a formal council motion approving the award. And so I think this should have been phrased, and it was my fault not catching that in agenda review, that committee recommend, council approve.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Janot.
I'll make that motion. I'll make that motion with the change to recommend to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janot. Motions on the table. Any further conversation, debate regarding the direction to administration? Seeing as none, I will call the question. All in favor? None opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Given. Skateboard public engagement, Mr. Given.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Ms. Nadon is here as well to answer any other detailed questions that council might have, but a very brief overview, as council is well aware of the genesis of this report and the intent. Administration is proposing that outline of the proposal for the skate park on the Ball Diamond A site could be posted on the municipal website, including a overview of the key considerations that were identified by the working group, which included municipal administration, skate park committee representatives, and the skate park designers. This first step would meet the informed level of public engagement, and administration would further recommend that we also consult with the public through the use of an online survey. So essentially, we would post the information for people to be able to see what is there and understand it. And then we would solicit their opinions about the information that has been posted through that online survey. So it is I think, a straightforward process. And I believe it gets to the level that council was asking for previously of ensuring that the public is aware of the proposal to relocate to Diamond A and that they had an opportunity to express their opinion about it. So Ms. Dawn and her team have engaged directly with the skate park committee as a part of that working group. And this is their recommendation on how to best move forward. As you can see, it could attaches quite nicely to the other item with respect to the culture and rec master plan that had been some council directed work. And I think a similar process would be easy enough to incorporate the discussion from earlier this morning about the bike park.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Thank you to you and Ms. Dunn and her team. This is a great report, and it's great to see the public engagement on the skateboard park moving forward. Questions for Mr. Gibbon or Ms. Dunn or her team? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Given and Ms. Nadon and others who are involved in preparing their report. I just wanted to make the comment more than a question, and it would apply equally to the next agenda item on the Culture and Recreation Services Review Public Engagement. I wanted to speak to my satisfaction, and I'm grateful for the way in which administration is utilizing our public engagement policy. I think the policy is well written. It's broad and specific enough at the same time to address these kind of issues. And I really appreciate that when we see a plan like this, it is measured against or profiled against the policy that we have, so that we can see the policy we have working effectively. And if we felt the policy was not effective, we would probably see that too. So just nice work on these two reports. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. I will continue with what Councillor Butler has already expressed. It's a very, very well presented report, and I thank you very much to all who were involved in putting this together. I agree with Councillor Butler, the way in which we can use our public engagement work to inform and then consult is really wonderful to see. And I really value the way Mr. Given has also tied in with the foresight to see that the Mountain Bike Skills Park, as our conversation earlier was leading to tie that into this idea. It's really well done, and I'm very grateful for the work that went in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Any other questions? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelleher MP. I have only one comment, and that is with respect to timing. And Mr. Given, perhaps you could remind us if we are facing any hard deadlines for decision making on either this item or the the subsequent one that we will come to. And I ask that only because in both cases, the engagement period is proposed to span from early to mid-May, which is only a couple of weeks. And unless we are under some requirement to get early answers, I would be inclined to give a little bit more time. The first part of May, people are just ramping up for summer business. And I would hate to lose potential engaged individuals simply because this wasn't the 2 weeks when they found time to look at the survey. So if that period could be expanded, that is the period for engagement. I would think there is some benefit to that, unless, again, we are required to make some decisions, say in June, and need the information by then.
Mr. Given?
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. Mayor Ireland, no, I don't believe that there are any particular deadlines that are drivers of the timelines here. Administration is attempting to ensure that we're acting on, council direction, moving things back to council for decision as quickly as possible. And, my observation would be in terms of public engagement, the vast majority of engagement that any interaction sees is within its a few days of it being launched. And so we can keep it open longer. If somebody's going to participate, they'll participate in the first few days. And it's not likely that keeping it open for longer will really drive that much more additional participation. But point taken that if it's a particularly busy time, then maybe just creating additional window for people would be reasonable. And I don't think if that's something that council wishes, I don't think we need a specific motion on that. We could simply extend to the end of May. And we could even inform you after the fact about how many people participated when, because I'm sure we get that kind of information from the survey data. They'd be able to show just for interest, because my sense is either people do it at the very last minute or they do it right out of the hop, and there sort of isn't any in between. So it'll be interesting to test and see on these two cases.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any other questions? If not, can I have recommendation from a member of council that the committee of the whole direct administration to proceed with the public engagement on the new proposed location for the skateboard park as presented? Councillor Wilson, you make that motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All in favor? None opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Given. (9.4) Culture and Recreation Services Review Public Engagement. Mr. Given.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. I saw Councillor Demota had something just prior to starting this item, so maybe I'll just pause just to see if there's something that you wanted to bring up, Councillor Demota, before I started in.
Thank you very much. Sorry,
Thank you. Your hand, my apologies.
That's okay. I was going to save it for later if I missed the opportunity. I was just wondering, and maybe with some assistance from Mr. Given through you, Mrs. Deputy Mayor, I was just wondering for now that we've gone through that process, just for the public engagement policy, I was just wondering if, even though this isn't on the committee task list that's attached to this agenda, I'm wondering if this would be a job of the legislative committee to review our current policy and then come back to council for a recommendation. I think, okay, go ahead, sorry.
No, thanks, Councillor Demota, for raising that. You will see on our motion action list, policy development and review that just came up at the April 13th meeting. At that time, Council Committee of the Whole directed administration to make recommendations to all of council on a process for regular review of all of our council policies. So I think my suggestion would be, rather than an independent review of one policy by a specialized group, the council's already indicated that they wish us to give you advice on how to review all policies. And we expect to come forward with that by June 8th.
That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Given.
Thank you, Councillor Demota, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. So the second report, I won't go through the details because it is almost a carbon copy, but the issues are independent from one another. So a similar process, or essentially the same process of informing the community through dedicated materials where they can actually review the draft recreation and facility services review, and then provide feedback through an online survey. The difference here would be that ultimately the intent of the culture and recreation services and facilities review would be for it to arrive at the council table for council receipt and adoption. And we would at that time be able to provide any additional comment that was received from the public through this engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Given.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Given. It's great to see this back here on front of council and to go for public review. We started this as a council 2 years ago, and I'm happy to see that it is finally getting to the public for review and input before we finish the review. Questions for Mr. Given? Then can I have a councillor that committee of the whole direct administration to proceed with the public engagement on the culture and recreation service and facility review as presented? Councillor Demota, make that motion. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Code of conduct. This was before us on April 13th, and we're back today for further discussion. Mr. Given.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller-Rampe. Ms. Nadon is here as well for the detail in the bylaw, but as council knows, provincial regulations have changed. We are required to adopt a specific council code of conduct bylaw, whereas previously the municipality did have a code of conduct, but it was incorporated into the procedure bylaw, which no longer met the provincial regulations. So administration has had some discussion with council previously. Attached, you'll find a refined draft of the code of conduct bylaw for council's consideration. Ms. Nadon has highlighted a number of changes in response to our discussion at the previous council committee of the whole meeting. The first, I think, in the whereas clauses was to identify the general spirit of the and intent of the bylaw, which was something that was brought over, I believe, from the code of conduct that was in the procedure bylaw. Additionally, under 1.2, there is a provision to rescind the Schedule 1 of the procedure bylaw, which was the previous code of conduct. Down to item 6.2, there is a correction to maintain the current standard of referencing closed session rather than in-camera session. 7.3 is a discussion about members of council not encouraging disobedience of any law established by the Parliament of Canada or the Legislature of Alberta and any municipal bylaw. So specifying that we, should not be encouraging people to disobey provincial or federal laws, along with we should not be encouraging people to disobey our municipal bylaws. Improper use of influence. There was a note there just about the proper use, I think a wording amendment from last time. There was discussion around the municipal use of assets, and administration has clarified in 12.2A that there is essentially an exemption for council members that they may use municipal property, including for election campaigns, upon the same terms as members of the general public. So in essence, if a council member wished to book a municipal space for use during a campaign period, they would have the same right to do that as any other member of the public, and through the same process as any other member of the public. One where there is still some decision making to be made, a very explicit decision making to be made, is 14.2. This has to do with gifts and hospitality, and specifying an amount of hospitality or gifts that shall not exceed. So we really do have to have a discussion about what is the dollar limit that council feels is acceptable for council members to receive. I have seen another code of conduct where this is combined with a provision for reporting. We don't necessarily have that here. But again, I think a specific indication of what an appropriate dollar amount, suggesting that gifts above that amount would become improper. And so council does need to define what that would be. And there are a couple of, there's another minor wording correction in 16.1 that members shall uphold the spirit and intent of the bylaw. I think before we may have just had one or the other of those words, either spirit or intent. And there was a couple other smaller matters that I might suggest that aren't highlighted in your package. Specifically, that items 13.3 and 13.4, they are under orientation and other training attendance, but they are actually more general principles related to council members as stewards of public resources and transparency and accountability. My suggestion would be that those might fit more appropriately under section 12, which talks about the use of municipal assets and services. But that would be all the major ones. Council may also wish to consider 17.1 that speaks about the review. Council might wish to provide a little bit more definition in terms of timeline for that review. It says it should be brought forward at the beginning of each term of council. Maybe council would wish to identify, within 120 days of a municipal election, because that would provide a little bit more specificity rather than saying, that there would be a window for it to come forward, respecting that the time after a municipal election is very busy as new councils are getting set up and starting their business. But with that, these are here for council's consideration. And with 14.2, we do need to have a specific number to insert there. I'll leave it to council for discussion, debate, or questions. Ms. Nadon is here and she may wish to highlight other areas, or she will be a resource to council for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Well, I was looking at the price of cowboy hats online, and a good quality one's about $230. So we can probably start there. I'm just making reference to what Mr. Given presented to us a couple weeks ago.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Ms. Nadon, do you want to lead us through it, or is there anything else you want to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Given did a great job of outlining what the sections that could need attention are, and I'm happy to just go with the flow with what council has to provide for input and answer any questions as required. If you prefer for me to lead you through it, I can, but.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nadon. Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There are, I think, 17 sections and 6 clauses in the preamble, and I think I have a list of 14 items, and I will address them in any way you want. I don't want to take an inordinate amount of time from council, and they are all mostly very small, but subject to your direction, I could just run through my list and throw it out there. I don't think they need a lot of discussion, but some obviously will.
Please go ahead, Mayor Ireland.
Just some simple wording changes in the last clause in the preamble. To be consistent, I think receptive should be receptiveness and speak should be speaking, just to be consistent with tense that is used there. And I'll just leave those notes. If anybody wants to address them, they can. I think that in the definition section, we ought to include a definition of closed. We intentionally changed that word, but it is nowhere identified. And I think later in the document, it might be confused with private. So we talk at one point about information received in private, but I think that we mean in a closed session. So I think it might be prudent to add a definition. Under the definition of the paragraph 2E investigator, I would prefer to remove reference to council and leave investigator to mean the individual or body established by council. I think it's dangerous for council to be the investigator in any circumstances. In paragraph 3, I wonder whether we can add to that definition, or either that or subtract the word ethical. This establishes standards for the conduct of members, some of which are standards of ethical conduct, but not all of which are ethical conduct. So I wonder whether we can look at that. So for example, attending learning sessions is hardly in the realm of ethics, but it's a pragmatic approach to educate counselors. And it is a duty, but it's not, in my view, an ethical duty. In section 5.3, there is a mention that a member who's authorized to act as council's official spokesman can't just convey their own position, particularly if that differs from council's, and that is fine, but I wonder whether we ought to broaden that to include a member who is not authorized. It seems to me once council makes a decision, it is expected that no councillor, whether authorized as the spokesman or not, goes out and undermines the decision of council. So I think we're simply missing an element in that. I don't disagree with what is there, but we haven't dealt with the general standard of councillors independently undermining a decision after it's been taken. In 7.2, and this comes later, so maybe it's sufficiently covered, but the section that says members shall respect the municipality as an institution, its bylaws, policies, and procedures. I just wonder whether we ought to add its personnel. It's just one more element of respect for the institution. It includes, in fact, is essentially the people. So I thought there might be an opportunity. Again, it's covered in some other sections, so maybe not critical. In section 8.6, members must not involve themselves in matters of administration which fall within the jurisdiction of the CAO. I wondered whether there is any benefit, and I leave this more to Mr. Given than to us, to add unless invited, because there are times when a CAO grapples with his duties and might want to invite council into that discussion. And I would hate to have to say, sorry, we can't help you because our code of conduct says we can't engage. So I leave that open. Confidential information, again, 9.1. This is the clause that says members must keep in confidence matters discussed in private. I think that means in closed session. But I think there's need for consistency. Just makes it clearer to members of the public, I think. 10.4. This is a question, if you are in conflict of interest, you must obtain legal advice, independent legal advice on your own dime. And I wonder whether that applies or should apply both for individuals who feel that they may be in conflict, or for someone else on council who might raise an objection on the basis that another councillor is in conflict. And if in that case, whose obligation is it? So if we are discussing a matter and somebody says, well, councillor so-and-so should not be able to vote on this because I think that they have a pecuniary interest in the outcome, is that councillor first expected to seek independent legal advice on that question on their own time? And it is not answered in this, and I raise it because it's possible that could be an issue. It has been an issue, I know, in other councils. Mr. Given already dealt with sections 13.3 and 13.4 that might be better put into Article 12, and I agree with that. Just a comment, section 16.1, in fact, we removed a word rather than adding words. It used to say that members shall uphold the letter, the spirit, and the intent, and the concern was that the letter might differ from the intent, and that's why the spirit and intent is there. And 16.2, I simply have a question, why it is worded as it is. Members are expected to cooperate. In every other aspect, this bylaw says members shall. And this one is merely an expectation. And maybe that is appropriate in these circumstances. It's an expectation that they will cooperate. But why should they not be compelled to cooperate just as they are compelled to do everything else? And then finally, in section 17.1, again, we refer to the standards of ethical conduct, but I think that it is more than only ethical conduct. It includes ethical conduct, but there are other standards of conduct that are required in the bylaw. And I'm sorry to be such a lecturer and professorial, but that was my reading of the bylaw. And I thank staff, but despite those numerous comments, I think it's really excellent work, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thank you also to staff for the good work on this. I echo Mayor Ireland's congratulations on that. It is everyone's lucky day because Mayor Ireland was professorial and diligent. You'll have to listen to me considerably less because I was able to stroke off about 10 of my items because they were the same as what Mayor Ireland raised. However, let me just look at a couple of the high points that I think weren't mentioned, and forgive me if they were. Section 5, communicating on behalf of the municipality. I think 5.1 needs to say a member must not claim to speak on behalf of council or the municipality unless authorized to do so. And that brings me, I raised that first, and I need to go back up to the purpose, 3.1. Purpose of this bylaw is just, we refer to their roles and obligations as representatives of the municipality. That is the roles and obligations of council. But council are not representatives of the municipality, at least not singly. We're representatives of the community at large. And I think that's a really important distinction, particularly because of the way we have defined municipality in definition G. Municipality, in the context of this bylaw, means the municipal corporation. Councillors are not representatives of the municipal corporation. We are representatives of the community to the corporation. And I think that's a really important distinction and affects 3.1. And again, as I said earlier, 5.1. That's maybe open to discussion, but that's certainly my view of the situation. Going to jump down to 8.6. Mayor Ireland already referred to this. It says that members must not involve themselves and so on within matters within the jurisdiction of the CAO. I think we should default to the word, the term that we've most commonly used here, which is a member must not. Council may see fit to delve deeper, but no member ever should. And I would propose that instead of saying members in 8.6, we should say a member. In 11.2, no member shall act as a paid agent. I think we should remove the word a paid. I don't think it's appropriate for a member to act as an agent of an individual, organization, or entity at all, whether paid or not. There is a line of distinction, it may be a fine one, between acting as an advocate but acting as an agent. Acting as an agent, whether paid or not, implies that one would always act or vote in favor of that organization, because that's a responsibility of an agent, and that is different from being an advocate. I would not like to see that the line of distinction is drawn at whether you received compensation for that. And finally, I took a little time and I looked at our existing code of conduct. And there are aspects of that I like quite a bit better. I really like the fact that it just says, we shall do these things and we shall not do these things. But I recognize that there's a difference between the way policy may be worded and a bylaw may be worded. So overall, I'm satisfied that we've captured the intent of what was already in our code of conduct. However, I'm going to read the opening paragraph of the code of conduct for members of council and council committees. And it says this: the specialized municipality of Jasper requires that its members of council and council committees not engage in actions which are or could be reasonably perceived as damaging to the trust, confidence, and faith of the public. That's a great sentence. Then it says, members shall at all times seek to advance the common good of the community which they serve, and shall truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise the office to the best of their knowledge and ability. And I regret the loss of those two sentences in the current document, and I would propose that they be included. What I like about them is they're at the top of the document. And frankly, if you believe and accept all that is contained within those two sentences, everything else just follows and flows. There's a couple of ways we could do that. I would suggest one would be to insert a new section 4, following purpose and application, and that section just be general. And that we just move that paragraph, 2 sentences over to there under general. The other thought I had would be those 2 sentences say, I think, much of what items 4.1A and B mean to say, but I think they say it better. So another approach would be to sub out A and B, or massage 4.1A and B to make sure we include the language that is in that opening paragraph. I always thought that if every councillor read, understood, and really thought about what's contained within that sentence, then we know why we're here and what we ought and ought not to be doing. And my last thing, again, going back to the old document, the existing document, is item 13. Members shall avoid public comment on staff performance. That is very clear. It is very concise, and it goes to something we've got within the new one somewhere, and I didn't highlight it, so I can't just find it. But I like the clarity and succinctness of that statement. So we have language about not involving ourselves in jurisdiction of administration, and we have other items, sentences about various things relating to how we relate to the organization. But I think that we're missing that succinct piece, that we ought to avoid public comment on staff performance. And I think the document would be clearer if it was included somewhere. I'd leave it to administration to consider how and where. So thank you very much. Those are the items I had to consider, which those which Mayor Ireland had not already mentioned.
I wonder, Council, if we've lost Deputy Mayor Kelleher, MP.
I'm wondering if it.
I'm back, I think. Sorry. Councillor Butler froze. He was right in the middle of the clarity of 13, but if everybody else heard it.
That was my last point.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Given, for getting me back. Okay. Any other comments from other councillors before I turn this back to Mr. Given and Ms. Nadon? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. I did have input on item number 17.1, when this should be reviewed before council. I think it'd be excellent to include this in the orientation process. So maybe specifically in the first 30 days of the term of the new council. I believe that code of conduct is one of the more important aspects of understanding your role as a counselor. And the dollar amount in 14.2, I'm not sure if we've decided on, but I think somewhere along the lines of what Councillor Demota expressed at $200, $250. I don't think I've received any gifts, but maybe Mayor Ireland with his experience has maybe a more precise number that he feels is appropriate after his years of service.
Mayor Ireland?
Actually, I think I was quite in line with Councillor Demota. I was thinking in the range of $250. It's sometimes so difficult. I think that probably the most valuable gift I've received is a silk tie in China when I was visiting there, but I have no idea what it might have been worth. But if anybody wants it, it's still in my closet. So I can give it to the municipality or anyone on council. But I think that is about the range. And I suppose there could be a debate about whether it's an actual item, because I don't know how you measure some of that stuff. It's very difficult, but I agree that there ought to be some number in there, and I think I too was persuaded by the cowboy hat story for Stompede, and that seemed to be about where that might land. While I'm speaking of Deputy Mayor, if I might, I thank Councillor Butler for referring us back to our existing code of conduct document, and there is one other item in there, and I had neglected this, and I don't believe that it is mentioned in the draft bylaw. But we did have a provision in the existing code of conduct that it would apply for a period of 12 months after leaving office, with the exception of retaining in confidence information received in confidence, which is a permanent obligation. And it might be worth adding that somewhere to the draft bylaw. There is a continuing obligation. And as Councillor Butler noted, if it is avoiding public comment on staff performance, that might well be something that you're expected to adhere to after leaving office, not just while you're in office. So I think that would be another additional item that could be added to the draft bylaw.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, for that. Councillor Demota.
Well, I really appreciate all the wordsmithing by administration and the mayor and Councillor Butler. This has been a really good workout. Definitely a little above my pay grade, so I appreciate the thought that went into it. I have a question for Councillor Butler in regards to, I believe, the old 13 when it came to reference of making the addition of member addressing staff performance. Were you making, is that staff overall or individual staff members? What's your intent there, or should that be changed?
Councillor Butler.
Well, thanks. Good question. I was simply lifting the wording from the old document, but it's an interesting question. We regularly congratulate staff on their positive contributions, but is it perhaps different from making comment on individual staff performance? I don't have an answer to your question, but it's well raised, I would say.
Mr. Given.
Deputy Mayor Keller-Harampe, there's one other item that I wanted to bring council's attention to for your consideration. With respect to the formal complaint process, the bylaw does set out a policy for process there. 15.1B says that all complaints shall be addressed to the investigator. As discussed before, we've identified that the investigator likely shouldn't be counsel. But the process that's laid out in 15 actually doesn't say where somebody is supposed to hand those into. So it says you must make a writing and complaint, you must address it to the investigator. It says what has to be in the complaint. It doesn't actually specify who you give it to. Is it the front desk clerk? Is it the mayor? Is it the CAO? Is it some person down this, so I think it might be just as a practical consideration, so that if somebody reading this bylaw knew what they were supposed to do, maybe it could be that 15.1B could say all complaints shall be addressed to the investigator and delivered to the CAO. Would be at least a starting point that would be clear, rather than it just suffers a little bit, because if I was reading this and interpreting what I was supposed to do, and I had done up my letter as required, I just wouldn't know where to take it.
Good point, Mr. Given. So with all these, is council in agreement with what Mayor Ireland, Councillor Butler has proposed? Councillor Butler, then Councillor Janot.
Thanks very much. To Mr. Given's point, I would suggest that complaints should be made in writing and delivered to the CAO, to administration, something of that nature. It seems to me that's the only appropriate way forward. And then I believe that the CAO's responsibilities from then on are addressed elsewhere in our in policy and regulation. That's just my suggestion on throwing that out there. However, what I wanted to mention is this, and I had forgotten this, and this is supplemental and following up on what Mayor Ireland mentioned back in definitions. The definitions, investigator can mean counsel. And I'm afraid I don't agree with Mayor Ireland's contention that the investigator should never be counsel. I am very concerned that if we don't allow for that, in my view, obvious possibility, then any complaint made to administration on the behavior of a counselor, we could be bound to bring in an outside investigator. And I'm aware of a couple of situations where there have been suggestions, even in my term, of an impropriety by a counselor. And while they may not have been made in writing, we as council did consider whether a breach of code of conduct had been made. And I think that the first judge of behavior of members as counselors, the first level of, if you will, arbitration there, of necessity lies with counsel. So I'm really uncomfortable with leaving out the potential that counsel is the investigator. I would have a hard time agreeing to the way the formal complaint process is laid out if we don't allow that potential that counsel could be the investigator. If we don't want to allow in the definitions that counsel could be the investigator, then I think we would need to alter the formal complaint process to allow that council could, of its own volition, determine that in its view, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. In its view, a breach of the code of conduct has or has not, or may not have occurred. So I'm really concerned about tying our hands by not allowing that council could, and I think appropriately should be, the first order of review of a complaint.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Janot.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to administration for the preparation of this document. I'm always pleased to be part of such a great team, to have a document prepared by administration and then revised and studied in great detail, as we've seen by our mayor and Councillor Butler. I just think it's great. I think that somehow, for sure, this has to be incorporated in an agreement document that to be presented to new councillors within 30 days after they got elected. There's only one item that I want some clarification on, and it's a discussion that Mayor Harlan brought in about a conflict of interest. And he said something about that members should not be allowed to vote on something that's a conflict of interest. But I think it's more than just vote. I think it's discuss and vote somewhere along the way. And I'm not sure where it has to appear in the document, but I think it's important to remember that if you're in a conflict of interest, you may not only not vote, you may not discuss. Thank you.
I do believe in our current code of conduct, if we have a conflict of interest currently, and it's happened to me in the past where I've left the room and I've had no discussions, I've had no input or known anything that was within that conversation. Councillor, no, good point though. Councillor McGrath.
Yes, and to continue, that is legislated in the Municipal Government Act on how to deal with pecuniary interests. So I believe that we already have that covered with overarching legislation.
So we've had a number of proposed changes here this morning for the document. How do we want to proceed? Ms. Nadon, Mr. Given?
Yeah. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. I think what we could do as administration is take away the recommendations for amendments and present it to council with those amendments. So if there was a motion directing administration to present this to council with amendments as discussed, I would note that there is at least one where it appears that there may be a difference of opinion with council. And so I think that council will have to deal with that, but I wouldn't suggest that we necessarily need to hold up all the other ones that it seemed like there was broad agreement on. And so perhaps we could, if council wanted to make a motion like that to direct us to prepare the amendments as discussed, we could do so, bring it forward to the next regular council meeting, and council could discuss and debate that one remaining point about council's role in an investigation, and then decide that, because at that stage it would be simply, a one item rather than one item out of 35 that we've discussed here, which sort of complicates matters. If we narrow the focus down to just that one item, so that when it arrives at council, it's sort of, okay, we're good with everything else, this one thing we need to sort out. That might make it easier for council because there's a bit of a challenge when it's one out of a whole bunch.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Given. Aren't we already operating under a motion recommending that this be? I'm just asking if we really need another motion. If it comes back to committee again and we look at it again, do we need every time a motion?
Well,
back to administration for more work? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Councillor Butler. I mean, I think the opportunity here is for our council to decide how close this is to being finished. If it's relatively close and there's simply this one remaining sort of principal point, then you could give us direction to revise and bring it to the next regular council meeting. Or and maybe this would be preferred actually, to give it back to administration and the direction that we revise and bring back to the next council committee of the whole. That way there would be more time for administration to process the large number of changes, which is fine. This is a regular expected part of the process. And that way you would have a chance to see it in a form where you'd be discussing and debating, where you could make a final change before it went to regular council for ultimate approval. So we really kind of could do either way. And I suppose on consideration, having that extra time to be able to process all of these before our next regular council meeting, which is just next week, would be preferred by administration.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. I'm curious if perhaps an option or options could be given to council in the investigation process. So let's say it's twofold, and it first gets reviewed by council, and council as a whole decides whether an investigator would be needed in that circumstance, an outside investigator, or what options administration could present for the process of in the investigation.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Mr. Given.
Yes, certainly we can identify alternate processes, and it really is about what level of detail council wants to work to here. I've seen examples where this is the complaints process is a few pages long, and so that can be helpful because it's very detailed and everybody understands exactly out front what it's going to look like, and there's no reason we couldn't do that here. We would just have to decide if that's the level of detail that we wish to go to, but administration could maybe bring forward some examples from other communities of what that could look like, but it is a worthwhile and important question.
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, sorry for drawing this out, but I think it's a critically important point, and I want to illuminate my concern with respect to this question of investigation. We formerly had in an earlier draft under investigation question, we had the potential of I think it was called an informal initial process, which would allow someone to bring forward a complaint with regard to code of conduct, not in writing and in an informal way. And we, I think, chose to remove that. And I was uncomfortable with that for this reason. So I'm going to use an example. Suppose I, as a counselor, and I can do that because 15.1 says any person. So if I have concerns with the behavior of a counselor in a council meeting or otherwise, I would likely now bring that to council, probably in a closed session. And I would probably just say, I don't think what you did meets the code of conduct. And very likely council would discuss that and decide whether we felt it did or did not, and very likely would dispense with that situation as is appropriate, in a fairly straightforward manner, and deal with it. The way I read what we would have here now is that I couldn't do that. That if I brought forward a complaint, even a small one, where I said, I don't think the councillor has behaved appropriately, the answer would be, well, you have to put it in writing because every complaint has to be in writing. And then we have to bring in an investigation. And there we go. We're into something much bigger than probably any of us ever intended. So I think we either have to loosen the definition of what a complaint looks like to allow a less onerous method to bring forward a complaint, or we have to allow that council can, in a first instance, be judge of whether a breach has occurred. So that's the kind of concern I have there. And thanks for giving me that opportunity to try to clarify.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Janot.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to thank Councillor Butler for the contribution on that very point. I think that's quite significant, quite important.
Thank you, Councillor Janot. Any other input from Mr. Given?
I would just say, Deputy Mayor, that I think just as a matter of process, if we have a motion directing administration to incorporate the proposed changes and return to Council Committee of the Whole, I think that would tie it off so that something has arrived in front of you. We've had discussion about it. You've made notes and you've made a motion to tell us to go away and do some work on it and come back to you. I think that ties it off nicely.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Can I have a councillor to make that motion? Councillor McGrath. All in favor? Thank you, Mr. Given. We will see this back at a future committee of the whole, probably the second week of May. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Given, Mr. Don, and the team. It was a great document, and thank you again for working with us on this and for bringing it back to us again in May. Correspondence, we received a letter from Daycare Funding, the Friends of Jasper Childcare Board, which was circulated to all the council. I will take this in as received by council. Any comments? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempy. I thank the Friends of Jasper Childcare Board for their letter, providing us with further information for the costs of childcare in our community. It's an important fact to recognize that the subsidy is available for families under $75,000 per year. And it's also really important to draw on our experience of non-judgment. As a former outreach worker, I worked with many families in Jasper who needed assistance, but that assistance wasn't necessarily communicated or dictated by their level of income. Just because you have a high threshold of income doesn't mean that you don't need support. And it's really important for us to remember that at this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Thank you, everybody.
I think Deputy Mayor Keller-Hempy, perhaps a motion to receive the letter for information.
Can I have a motion that we receive? Councillor McGrath will make that motion that we receive this letter for information. Thank you, Mr. Given. Thank you, Councillor McGrath. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 11, motion action list. Everything on here, Mr. Given, I've noticed is coming back. We will have target boards and committee June. Ball Diamond Day for Skatepark by June 1. That would be the, it could be later now that we have extended the deadline for the input. Am I correct?
Well, Councillor Keller-Hempy, I think in just in terms of the way we use the motion action list, I was going to advise or recommend that we could delete that item because you know, the description, the motion previously was that we were supposed to come back to you with a recommendation for public engagement. Ms. Nadon did that here today, and so I think that that item could come off. It will be replaced, you know, by additional information coming later on. But I think that that asked and answered. And I think other than that, all the rest of the items are on track for their delivery to council. So just a motion to approve that one change to the motion action list of deleting the Ball Diamond Day item.
Okay, can I have a councillor that will accept the motion list with that one deletion? With motion. Councillor Butler, all in favor? Thank you. That is carried. I'm getting used to all these new motions in committee of the whole. Council representation on boards, upcoming meetings. Any councillor have anything to report? Councillor Wilson and I will be attending the Community Futures West Yellowhead board meeting on Thursday through Zoom. Other than that, that's all I have to report. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. Not comments on my boards or committees, but more or less commending the organizers of the virtual volunteer recognition week that took place last week, as well as the board who put together a really fabulous Jasper Pride Festival weekend that was virtual and really, really well done. We had lots of fun participating in the programs that were offered virtually. And I'd just like to express gratitude to both of those organizations that did an excellent job of providing the community with lots to do over the last week and a half.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for that. I participated in both and it was wonderful. The finished products was just awesome that was circulated in the community. Any other councillors report? Councillor Janelle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Last Friday, virtually by Zoom, I attended a regular meeting of the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. pleased to report that in spite of the many challenges the organization is facing, that's usually because losing members, a lot of municipalities don't feel valuable. As good work has been made by our CAO to convince some of them to come back. But in spite of that, we gain new members because there are new attractions that are within the boundaries or within the vicinity of the Yellowhead Highway. People are signing on. So there's, it's a very old organization dating back to 1947, but it still has value and merit. Another item that was discussed was the proposed speed limit increase on divided highways in Alberta to 120 kilometers per hour. Of course, our discussion has to be maintained to only the Yellowhead Highway. So general discussions, yes, they were included, but not necessarily valid or whatever. But just a reminder that we as a community would be affected by that, and one way or the other. And as individuals, perhaps pass on some contributions, whether directly to the government or to the association. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janot. Any other councillors? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Rampe. I just want to give fair notice, particularly to Councillor McGrath, that I am seriously conflicted on May the 4th. It may impact both our regular council meeting and the intergovernmental meeting that is scheduled. And I will do what I can to free myself for one of those, but it may impact both to some degree. So I just want that out there. We will have an incoming Deputy Mayor first meeting. So Councillor McGrath, be prepared for unfortunately my absence next Tuesday morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ireland. If nothing else, upcoming events, we have May 4th intergovernment meeting at 1:30 through virtual meeting, and the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce general meeting through Zoom at 9 a.m. on May 6th. We have 4 items in camera. I do believe none of them will come back with any outcomes to the public. Am I correct, Mr. Given?
For the administration side, that's correct. My understanding of the other ones that were added by council are likely to come back, but at a future council meeting. And so I don't believe that there are any that would be coming back today. But Councillor Demota may be able to provide more clarity around that.
Councillor Demota?
No.
Okay. With that, I would then, we have a new Zoom link that's going to come in. I will call a motion to move in camera. If I could have a councillor to make that motion at 11:26. Councillor Janot, all in favor? I would like to thank the members of the public and administration, and we will return to in camera, and then we can decide if we want to take a lunch break or continue with the meeting.
Councillor Keller-Rampe, if council wishes to take a lunch break, I can just start the Zoom link for 1 o'clock if you'd like, or 1:15, whatever council wishes, but maybe we can just decide that now, and I can make sure that it's sent out for the right time. So it's council's wish.
Councillors? Councillor McGrath? 1? Mayor Ireland?
Yeah,
1?
1 o'clock would be great.
Okay, we will move back in camera at 1 o'clock. See you all then. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Keller-Rampe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to all the public and to all admin that has joined us.